come to. If you want me next year, I'll come back for a victory lap. I don't ever speak about my personal conversion in public. I've actually only mentioned it here last time once, and once I spoke at a prayer breakfast about it in Washington. But I went through a very difficult period. I feel that God told me, I need you to be a better person for what I have in mind for you than you've been in the past. And when I went through that trial, none of my liberal Democratic friends had anything to do with me. And Bill Armstrong and Mike Huckabee and Trent Lott and Chuck Colson deluged me with Bibles. Bill sent me Mere Christianity, which spawned an addiction to C.S. Lewis. I read all of his stuff. And like C.S. Lewis, I became a lapsed atheist. I don't talk about it that much in public because I don't ever want it to be something that is sounding louder outside of me than inside of me. And that's because I'm not sure I completely trust myself. I want to know that I'm invited here because of politics, not because of my faith. My faith is something very personal and controls every single thing that I do, every moment of every day. That's the deal I made. Okay, now let's get back on greater ground politics. First of all, I'm absolutely thrilled that Bill Armstrong is with us. Thank you, God. Well, Barack Obama won that court decision. He will rue this day. Because we were going to beat him before that court decision, now we're going to slaughter him. Who here would like to see us beat him by 15 points? Well, 40% support this horrible law, and 55% oppose it. And the Supreme Court has just put this in play as the central issue of this election. It is almost inconceivable that somebody could oppose this law, want it repealed, and yet vote for Barack Obama. And that's not going to happen. This election just went, in my view, from a 5 to 7 to 8 point win to a 10 to 15 point win. Thank you, John Roberts. At stake now is not the pursuit of happiness. That's the economy. At stake now is not liberty. That's the whole nexus of federal regulation that Obama's pushing. At stake now is life. We all may disagree with some of our friends as to when life begins. Conception, viability, birth, but we sure as heck can all agree it ends at death. And the most fundamental meaning of right to life is the right to God to tell you when it's time to die, not the federal government. Do you remember 2 years ago, the feds issued a ruling that they would only reimburse mammograms every other year because they said that if you're under 50, annual mammograms make no sense, and they do not say they're not worth it, and they only save 13,000 lives a year. And given the cost of annual mammograms, that's a cost per mammogram, per life saved, that is not worth it. Really? How about for your wife, your mom, your sister, your daughter, your granddaughter? Is it worth it then? what we are doing in a program that aims to cut Medicare by $500 billion, not through streamlining, not through wellness, not through empowering the consumer to negotiate over prices and bring down the price of medical care, but by federal requirements of what treatment to use and what treatment you are not allowed to use. That is called euthanasia. Canada has 10% higher incidence of colon cancer than the United States does. And the reason is because they don't approve colonoscopies as frequently in Canada as they do in the United States, because the government doesn't think it's worthwhile, not worth the cost expenditure. And then if you get colon cancer, you are 15% more likely to die of it in Canada than you are here, because they will not approve the use of the medication Avastin to treat colon cancer, which is the state-of-the-art drug in chemotherapy for colon cancer. But it's expensive, and the Canadian government won't allow it. And as a result, tens of thousands of Canadians die who do not need to die. Those are the stakes in the Obamacare legislation. And then the stakes at the other end of the spectrum. For young people, you make $30,000 a year, okay? You take home 22. That's an income of what? $450 a week. How would you like to have to spend $1,500 of it as a fine, a tax, for not having health insurance? 2 weeks' wages, almost 3, as a tax for not having health insurance. I wonder how young people will like that. After all, you're talking about a bunch of people who are in their 20s, who are largely healthy, and what they want is 2 things. They want their children covered, and they want catastrophic insurance in case they get hit by a bus. Well, the children coverage we already have in the Children's Health Insurance Program, SCHIP, which Bill Clinton got passed, and I helped in it. Hillary did not play the role she says she did in it, but it's there, it's on the books, and it's protecting those children. And catastrophic coverage is about a quarter of the cost of coverage of what Obama wants to make those 20-year-olds pay. And why does Obama want to do that? So he can take their money and use it to subsidize the rest of his program. And he's going to do this by taxing young people who do not buy insurance. He's also going to tax sick people. That's right, sick people. Right now, you can deduct medical expenses if they are more than 7.5% of your income. He's going to raise that to 10%. So he literally is going to increase the tax on sick people by 1/4. That's terrific. Prosthetic limbs will be taxed. Pacemakers will be taxed. Hearing aids will be taxed. Every single medical device will be taxed. And the reason for that is because the medical device industry didn't support this bill, and he punished them by making them pay for it with a sales tax on all of these items that we need to keep alive. The stakes in fighting against this bill are enormous. Now, the Supreme Court has restored the individual mandate, but it has given each of us an individual mandate to beat Obama, take the Senate, and repeal this bill. All Roberts said in his opinion is, I'm not going to do the heavy lifting for you. Do it yourself. This is a democracy. How fitting that this fundamental piece of legislation should be the referendum on which this presidential race turns. Everybody talks about the gridlock in Washington. Well, we're a democracy. There are times when you have a gridlock because there are 2 points of view. And the time comes to make a choice, not to split the difference, not to paper it over, but to make a choice. and we will have a clear choice in November, and we are going to make it the conservative way. Now, a lot of you, and I, of course, read polls every hour of every day, and I just want to spend a little bit of time discussing polling with you. There are three kinds of surveys. Surveys that sample adults, half of whom don't vote. Surveys that sample registered voters, a third of whom don't vote. And surveys that sample likely voters, a tenth of whom don't vote. Now, Barack Obama's best demographic are people that don't vote. He sweeps them. He carries them overwhelmingly. If you're not going to vote, you're going to be for Barack Obama, most likely. So when you put a bunch of those people that won't vote into the mix with people that do vote, you produce biased survey results. These results are not an indication of Barack Obama's strength. They're an indication of his weakness, because he can't get the people that would vote for him to vote. It's not like they have too much schedule. Most of them are unemployed. Most of them are on food stamps. Not through their own choice, but they are. But they tend not to vote. Among those who do vote, Romney has, in most of the polls, had a 3 or 4 or 5 point lead. Rasmussen is the only one that routinely samples likely voters. It's twice as expensive as to sample registered voters, because you got to call 2 people to find one you can get who's a likely voter. Right now, on the strength of the court decision, the race is evened up, but I expect in the next week or so, Romney will continue to move out to the lead he's had. But the best survey Rasmussen had, which was pretty well where it was last week, was 48 Romney, 43 Obama, sometimes 47 to 44, that kind of range. Well, then the question becomes, what happens to the undecided vote? And history shows us that the undecided vote always, always, always goes against the incumbent. To give you a frame of reference for this, are you going to be married to the same person next year? Are you undecided? What does that say about your marriage? When you are undecided, you have decided not to vote for the incumbent. You're just waiting to be pushed a little bit to find out who you're going to vote for, and you need to learn more about the other candidate. And this isn't just theory. I went back to 1964 and looked at every single election in which an incumbent president ran for a second term. And in every single one of them, the undecided vote went against the incumbent, even when the incumbent was winning by a massive margin. Goldwater got it against Johnson. McGovern got it against Nixon. Mondale got it against Reagan. And I believe that Romney is going to get it against former President Barack Obama. Now, this may be repetitive of something I said last year, and I hope it's repetitive of something I had the foresight to say 2 years ago. But let me explain why we are not recovering economically, because you need to get it to really understand what we can do about it in this election. Obama is treating the wrong disease. The disease he's treating is recession, the boom and the bust oscillation that goes on in the American economy, where it happens every 8 or 10 years, runs over a period of 2 to 3 years, and then solves itself. That is not what we are confronting today. We had a recession that started in June of '07 and ended in June of '09. And the world recovered, we didn't. But what happened was that when Obama took office in January of '09, he couldn't wait for this to end naturally. And he decided to seize the moment, as Rahm Emanuel said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Seize that moment dramatically to raise federal spending, dramatically to pass his stimulus package of $800 billion. And he borrowed all of the money. And then he had to borrow it year after year after year since. And that indebtedness, that increased indebtedness, so raised the level of public sector debt throughout the world that it caused the global capital markets to seize up, as if you're in a car without any oil. The gears just seize, and nothing moves, nothing changes. When Obama took office, the total public sector debt, that's all countries, all states, all cities on the planet combined, was $20 trillion. Now, with him supplying 2/3 of it, it is now $35 trillion. And the world just couldn't handle it. The world freaked out. That's a technical economic term. I'll share the formula with you. It's kind of A minus B divided by Q with the square root of something or other. The world freaked out. And they just said, hey, we don't have this kind of money. So everything dropped dead. Lenders stopped lending, borrowers stopped borrowing, consumers stopped spending, and businesses stopped investing. Not that they didn't have the money, they were terrified and they didn't use the money they had to spend to get the economy going. Households got $1 trillion of that stimulus money, went into the household's pocketbook, and all of it, about 90% of it, went to pay down household debt, not new spending. Car loans, student loans, credit card balances, mortgages. Because people were scared. They didn't want to buy a flat screen TV when they might lose their job tomorrow. That might be the last money they get. Corporations got $1 trillion of federal money. Cash on hand of major corporations has gone from $1.2 trillion when Obama took office to $2 trillion now, and probably 2.2 when he leaves office in a few months. And you know, there's no interest rates. You save money, you put it in the bank account, what's your interest rate? A big fat 0 or 1/4%. It's the equivalent to putting it under the mattress. So these companies are so insecure and so worried by the economic conditions and the global debt levels that they would rather not earn anything on their money than invest it in creating jobs in their own companies. Banks got $1 trillion. Let me tell you how that worked. I came to Congressman Tipton, and I'm the Federal Reserve Board, and I said, hey, Scott, you're the head of the Scott Tipton National Bank. Do you have any mortgage-backed securities in your vault? And Scott says, Dwight, mortgage-backed securities, I'm drowning in them. They're worthless. The debt is more than the value of the property, and they're not paying me any money. Well, I'd like to buy them from you for $100 million. And Scott says to me, are you out of your mind? They're worthless. And I'll say, I don't care, here's a check for $100 million. Now, there's no money to cover it, but I've just printed $100 million. That's how the Fed does that. So Tipton now has $100 million. But he doesn't want to lend it to people out here. He'd love to. But the Treasury Department and the FDIC is threatening to close him down if he makes risky loans. So community bankers are paralyzed with fear of federal regulation. And as a result, what he ends up doing is lending it back to the federal government at 3.5% interest. And that's how we're funding our national debt. China is not lending us money anymore. We are printing the money, giving it to banks, and borrowing it back at 3.5% interest. It's brilliant. So the banks are now sitting on $1 trillion of cash. And what Obama keeps doing is printing more money and spending more money and borrowing more money to finance it. It's not doing any good. It's like you have a 15-year-old dog that's half dead and all he wants to do is sleep on the floor all day. And Obama's giving him more leash in case he wants to run. So, and when he borrows that money, he is adding to the debt implosions, to the debt situation, and adding to the fear that we all have. This economic construct, by the way, is called a debt implosion cycle. And it happens about every 50 years. It happened in 1840, it happened in 1890, it happened in 1930, and it's happening now. and it typically lasts for 5 to 10 years. And the only way you can shorten it is by cutting back the borrowing, paying back the debt, cutting back the spending, which gives the whole world room to breathe. And then business can start investing, and banks can start lending, and people can start borrowing, and households can start spending again. But the crisis in Greece and in Italy and in Spain, that's the tip of the iceberg. The stagnation in the United States and China and other countries is the iceberg itself, all caused by the same thing, the shortage of capital brought about by Barack Obama's borrowing. So what's happening is it's like the Middle Ages. When somebody was sick, they said, "You have evil spirits. So let me cut open your arm and take out your blood, and we'll remove the evil spirits." And then when the son of the gun was half dead, they said, "See, he still has evil spirits inside. Got to remove the rest of his blood." And then when he drops dead, they said, "I told you he had evil spirits." So that's what Obama is doing with this policy of borrowing. Now, we are going to win the White House. We are going to win the Senate. If the election were held right now, my analysis of the polling in each of these states is that George Allen would be elected the new senator from Virginia. A Republican Connie Mack would defeat Nelson for the Senate seat in Florida. Heather Wilson in New Mexico would probably defeat the Democratic candidate, Heimlich, I think is his name, in New Mexico. We would take the open seat in Nebraska. Kerry is not going to win. We would defeat Claire McCaskill in Missouri. Rick Berg would take that open seat in North Dakota. And we would pick up the open seat in Wisconsin, where Tommy Thompson is now 17 points ahead of Paul. And then we would be 50-50 on our chance to beat Debbie Stabenow with Pete Hoekstra in Michigan. And I think we can end up winning that seat. And we would have a very good chance, and I also believe we're going to win, in Ohio, where I think Josh Mandel will defeat Sherrod Brown. And we have a decent shot, less of a shot, but still a decent shot, in Pennsylvania, where Smith, I think, has a very decent shot of defeating Casey. I think Romney's going to carry Pennsylvania, and I think this state, which elected a Republican governor, a Republican senator, and 2 Republican houses, may elect another Republican senator. Casey can be beaten. I know, his father was my client. And we have a shot at Menendez in New Jersey, the single most corrupt member of the United States Senate. It's a distinction. Tester, by the way, who's going to lose in Montana, I didn't list that, to Denny Rayburn, has the honor of being the stupidest member of the United States Senate. And I think Scott Brown has a good shot to hold on to that seat, even if Elizabeth Warren puts on her war paint. Maine will lose, and isn't it a loss to America, to the country, to the Republican Party, to the Conservative Party, that we no longer have that bold apostle of conservatism and republicanism to fight for us, the senator from Maine, Olympia Snowe? It's terrible. But now we'll have a real Democrat in her place. But I think when you add that up, you're looking at a net gain of 8 to 10 seats. You're looking at going from 47 to 54, 55, 56, or 57. Now that's not 60, but I got news for Barack Obama and Harry Reid. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you only needed 51 votes to pass Obamacare, we only need 51 to repeal it. All the more so now that Roberts has ruled that it's a tax, and you don't need 60 votes on revenue bills. So I think we can do very well with that. And there's not going to be a filibuster on any of this stuff. With 55, 56, 57 Republican senators probably 20 more Republicans in the House, a landslide Republican victory for president, the Democrats will be in shell shock. Any of those candidates that are up in 2014 are going to absolutely hunker down and do whatever they have to do to get out of the line of fire. Remember that Ronald Reagan passed his entire package in 1981 with a Democratic House of Representatives led by Tip O'Neill. He didn't carry the House, he carried the Senate. So I think those prospects look very good. But it is at the state level that the most exciting things are happening. Scott Walker's re-election because it means, not just as a precursor of the overwhelming victory we're going to have in November, not just because it cut union revenues in half in Wisconsin and made it impossible for them to be the political force they've been, not just because it gives local government power over education that they haven't had because the unions have usurped it, but because we've tried everything else. We've increased spending on education from an average of $7,500 per pupil to $10,000, inflation adjusted in 20 years, and test scores haven't moved at all. We now have to understand that unless we break the power of the teachers' union, get rid of bad teachers, have merit pay for good teachers, and school choice for parents, we are not going to succeed at having a good school system in the United States of America. And now that Scott Walker has gone forward, and Mitch Daniels has gone forward, and John Kasich, the governor of Ohio, has gone forward, and Rick Scott, the governor of Florida, has gone forward, and Jan Brewer, the governor of Arizona, has gone forward, and Christie, the governor of New Jersey, has gone forward. Now all the cowards can follow, because they survived. Now, all of this is good news, but now I want to talk to you about the really scary stuff. This is all new. I doubt any of you know it. Those who've gotten my book, Screwed, and you'll understand the title in a minute, understand what I'm talking about. But we are facing the most colossal challenge we will ever have faced in the lame duck session of Congress that will convene after Obama loses and after the Senate goes Republican. But it will consist of the old Democratic senators and retiring rhinos, Republican liberals, who are still in that body and now are freed from ever having to face the voters again. There is a conspiracy going on, and I haven't lost it. It really is. In fact, I'm considering writing an essay called Here Come the Black Helicopters, where Obama is going to give us a going-away president of transferring massive amounts of American sovereignty to the control of the United Nations. It's called the Law of the Sea Treaty, L-O-S-T, LOST, Law of the Sea Treaty. It was negotiated, of course, by Jimmy Carter. Ronald Reagan refused to sign it, Bush refused to sign it, and then Clinton renegotiated it, signed it, but he couldn't get it ratified. And now there's going to be a full court press led by John Kerry, head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and Obama to get this treaty ratified in the lame duck session. It turns over to United Nations control 71% of the planet, the seas, the oceans, and it replaces the United States Navy with a group called the International Seabed Authority, with the responsibility for keeping sea lanes open and providing freedom of navigation. And the United States Navy will need the permission of this tribunal in the resolution of international disputes at sea. And the tribunal will sit in Hamburg, Germany, and the judges will be appointed by the Secretary General of the United Nations. This literally strips the Navy of its power and its responsibility. That's not the worst part of it. The worst part of it is that it says that American offshore oil and gas wells and mineral mines are subject to taxation by the International Seabed Authority, which can then use the revenue it taxes and give it to third world countries. And they're talking about an initial fund of $100 billion, taxed from American companies. This treaty gives the power to tax Americans to the United Nations. Forget foreign aid, forget voting on it, forget loans to underdeveloped countries. They will have the power to tax and seize our oil and gas revenues, royalties, and distribute them as they wish throughout the third world. And the body that will decide this has 193 members, just like the General Assembly. It's the Seabed Authority, and it's one nation, one vote. We'll have one vote. And it also obliges us to turn over to third world nations for free our offshore oil drilling technology. It's a huge step in ending the American sovereignty and giving it over to an international authority. And it's not alone. There's another treaty called the Gun Control Treaty, which sets up a body in Geneva that will promulgate global regulations concerning firearms.